They said money could buy anything. But as Ethan Montgomery stood in the echoing silence of his mansion, he knew they were wrong. A man worth billions, hailed as a genius in the tech world, yet powerless against the one thing that mattered most. His sons. Liam and Noah, 4 years old. Twin boys with bright eyes and motionless legs. Every doctor had said the same thing, with that same sterile sympathy. They will never walk. Mr. Montgomery. Those words played on repeat in his head like a curse. He had built empires, conquered markets, outsmarted competitors, but he could not outthink fate. After losing his wife to a long battle with cancer, Ethan had buried his heart under spreadsheets, board meetings, and flights that took him anywhere but home. Every corner of the mansion reminded him of her laugh. Every medical device reminded him of failure. He filled the void with silence, pretending it was strength. He told himself he was doing everything he could, yet deep down, he knew he was running. 19 nannies had tried and left. Each arrived full of confidence and left in tears. The twins grew quieter. The laughter faded. Sometimes, late at night. Ethan would walk past their room and see them asleep small, fragile, trapped in bodies that refused to obey. He would touch the door frame and whisper, "I'm sorry." Then walk away before the guilt swallowed him whole. Money could buy time, doctors, machines, but not miracles. And Ethan Montgomery, the man who had everything, was about to discover how powerless everything could be. They came with glowing resumes and confident smiles. 20 women, 20 promises, 20 failures. Each one arrived at the Montgomery estate believing she could fix what science could not. They brought charts, devices, routines, and expensive optimism. Ethan signed every check without blinking. Results were what he paid for, but one by one, they left. The first quit after 3 weeks, the second after a single day. By the 5th, Ethan stopped asking why. He knew the answer. The twins had stopped responding to anyone. Liam would stare past them, his small hands gripping his blanket as if he could hold on to the world slipping away. Noah would turn his face toward the window, eyes vacant, lost in some silent universe only he could see. The nannies tried laughter, toys, reward charts, even specialized therapy equipment that cost more than cars. Nothing broke through the wall. The house became a revolving door of polite smiles and failed hope. Each time a car drove away from the driveway, Ethan felt the same cold echo of defeat. He told himself not to care. He told himself his sons were used to disappointment, but the truth clawed deeper than he wanted to admit. He was watching his children disappear behind a glass wall of stillness. Some nights, he would sit in the hallway outside their room, half drunk on whiskey and half drowned in guilt, listening to the sound of machines breathing for them. That rhythmic hiss was the soundtrack of his failure. He would whisper, "Stay strong, boys," knowing full well he was the one falling apart. Every specialist said the same thing. The neurons weren't firing. The muscle tone was too weak. Focus on comfort, not recovery. One neurologist had advised, comfort. What kind of comfort existed for a father who watched his sons fade into silence? So Ethan did what he knew best. He worked harder than ever. The more the world praised him, the emptier he felt. He was a man surrounded by noise, yet living inside a tomb. Each nanny that came after felt like another cruel joke. There was Catherine, the pediatric therapist with polished degrees who treated the twins like case studies. There was Sylvia, the nurse with military precision who ran the house like a hospital ward. And there was Elena, whose kindness made Ethan think, for a moment, that maybe she could reach them until she broke down crying after Noah flinched from her touch. They all left the same way, quietly, defeated. Some left resignation letters on the kitchen counter. Others couldn't even face him, slipping away at dawn while the mansion still slept. He stopped learning their names. stopped remembering their faces. To him, they were just chapters in a story that refused to change its ending. And yet, behind that cold exterior, Ethan was unraveling. There were moments when he caught himself standing in the twins' empty playroom, staring at the untouched toys, the tiny shoes neatly lined up, the drawings pinned on the walls, a rocket, a sun, a stick figure, family holding hands, drawings made when their mother was still alive. He would close his eyes and hear her voice. Promise me you'll never give up on them. He had promised, and he was failing her. The mansion, once a place of light and laughter, had become a mausoleum of memories. The walls seemed to breathe sadness. Even the staff moved quietly, as if afraid to disturb the ghosts that lived there. Ethan's reflection haunted him. The mirror showed a man with perfect suits, perfect posture, and hollow eyes. He looked like someone who had everything. He felt like someone who had nothing. By the 4th year, when the 20th nanny drove away, he didn't watch from the window anymore. He just sat at his desk, staring at the flickering lights of the city, whispering to no one, maybe this is it. Maybe they were never meant to walk. He said it aloud as if trying to make peace with the unbearable, but deep inside, a quiet voice refused to die. A voice that whispered, "What if you're wrong?" And though he didn't know it yet, that voice was about to change everything. The rain came down in sheets that morning, a cold November storm pounding against the glass walls of the Montgomery mansion. Ethan hated mornings like that. They reminded him too much of the day his wife died. He stood by the window, half dressed in a tailored suit, staring at the driveway where another car had just pulled in. Another nanny. Another name he would forget by next month. The door opened and she stepped inside. Grace Parker? She didn't look like the others. No polished heels, no expensive perfume, no confident smile rehearsed in a mirror. She wore a navy coat too thin for the weather and carried a worn leather satchel that looked older than she was. Her hair was damp from the rain, framing a face that held no arrogance, only calm. "Mr. Montgomery?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. He gestured toward the living room, where the light reflected off marble in silence. Her resume was unimpressive. No elite medical school, no reference from private clinics, just small-town hospitals, community centers, and something vague about working with children who forgot how to smile. Ethan barely skimmed it. He had seen this pattern before. They came with compassion, left with excuses. "You understand the situation?" he asked flatly. "My sons, Liam and Noah, suffer from severe neuromuscular paralysis. Every specialist has confirmed there's no chance of improvement. I'm not looking for miracles. Miss Parker, I'm looking for stability." Grace didn't flinch. She placed her satchel down gently and looked him straight in the eye. "I understand." But instead of asking about therapy schedules or medical routines, she asked something else. "What makes Liam laugh?" Ethan blinked, thrown off guard. She continued quietly, "And when Noah feels sad, what brings him comfort?" For a moment, he didn't speak. No one had ever asked him that before. Not one of the 19 professionals who had come before her. They had all asked for medical reports, progress charts, and neurology scans. None had asked about laughter. None had asked about comfort. The words hung in the air like a spark in a dark room. Ethan's throat tightened. I don't know," he admitted before he could stop himself. "They don't laugh much." Grace nodded slowly, her gray eyes full of a calm understanding that unsettled him. "Then maybe that's where we'll start." He almost laughed at her naivety. "Start?" As if hope was a light switch she could flip on. But something in her tone, gentle yet certain, silenced his cynicism. When she followed him down the hallway toward the twins' room, Ethan spoke out of habit, listing medical procedures, safety protocols, dietary restrictions. Grace didn't take notes. She didn't even pretend to. By the time he finished, she was no longer walking beside him. She had already stepped into the room. Ethan stopped at the doorway. Grace was kneeling beside Liam and Noah, greeting them at eye level. Her voice was soft, steady, warm like a lullaby that didn't belong to this cold house. "Hello, Liam. Hello." "Noah," she said, her tone carrying the rhythm of a melody. "I've heard you're both very smart. I want to know what you like the most." The boys didn't answer, but they didn't look away either. Liam's gaze flickered. Noah blinked twice, curious. Grace smiled and, without warning, began to hum a low tune, rich, soulful, something between jazz and gospel. Her voice filled the sterile air with life. Her hands moved gently with the rhythm, tracing invisible patterns in the air. For the first time in years, the room didn't feel like a hospital. It felt alive. Ethan froze in the doorway. He had hired countless experts, but none had ever made the air shift like this woman did. Something deep inside him stirred, something he thought was gone forever. Hope. He tried to bury it again, but it refused to die. The house had never known warmth. Every sound inside was mechanical machines humming, air filters sighing, footsteps echoing against marble floors. It was a place of wealth, but not life, until Grace Parker began to sing. She didn't open a chart or touch a single piece of medical equipment. She simply knelt between the twin boys, meeting their eyes as if they were old friends. The storm outside tapped softly against the windows, like a drummer waiting for her cue. Then came her voice, low, rich, gentle, a melody that didn't belong in a hospital room. It was jazz, but softer, slower, wrapped in the warmth of gospel and the ache of something human. Her voice filled the room like light slipping through a crack. She moved her hands gracefully through the air, shaping the rhythm like invisible waves. The sound wasn't perfect, but it was alive. Liam froze first, his wide blue eyes locked on her fingers, watching every movement like a secret language he had been waiting to learn. His breathing slowed, his usual restlessness stilled. Then came Noah. For months. The boy had made no sound except shallow sighs, but now his lips trembled, and from his throat came the faintest hum, soft, uncertain, fragile. A single note, but real. Grace smiled, her eyes glistening. "That's beautiful. Noah, you found your voice." Ethan stood frozen in the doorway. He wanted to speak, to ask what she was doing, to remind her that his sons needed therapy, not songs. But the words never left his mouth. Something inside him cracked open as he watched his boys respond for the first time in years. The machines hummed quietly behind them. But for the first time, they were not the legotest sound in the room. It was the boys breathing, the faint hum of Noah's note, the delicate rhythm of Grace's song. Liam's hands began to twitch to the beat. Grace noticed and nodded softly. "That's right," she whispered. "Follow the rhythm. Let it tell your body what to do." Noah blinked twice, his head moving ever so slightly, mimicking her gestures. Grace's smile widened. "You're explorers," she whispered to them, her voice trembling with emotion. "Every sound you make is a discovery. Every breath is a new adventure." The twins were completely still now, not from stiffness, but focus. The air felt thick with something Ethan hadn't felt in years. Hope. Then, a small voice broke through the silence. "Papa." Ethan's heart stopped. He gripped the door frame so hard his knuckles went white. Liam turned his head slowly toward him, his voice thin but clear. "Papa, will she stay with us?" The question was so simple, so human, it tore Ethan apart. He hadn't heard Liam speak a full sentence outside of therapy sessions in months. And now, that tiny voice carried all the trust and fear he had tried so hard to suppress. For a moment, Ethan couldn't move. His throat burned, his eyes filled. He swallowed hard, forcing down a sob. Grace turned to him. her expression soft but steady. No words, no explanations, only quiet understanding. Noah looked at his brother, then giggled, a small, breathy sound that filled the air like a spark. Liam followed with a laugh of his own, high-pitched and real. Ethan pressed a hand to his mouth, unable to contain the flood of emotion. The sound of their laughter rolled through the house, echoing down the long, empty halls. For the first time in 4 years, the mansion was no longer silent. For the first time, it felt alive. And in that moment, Ethan Montgomery understood that miracles didn't arrive with warning they sang their way in. The next morning, Ethan woke to a sound he barely recognized. Laughter. It floated down the hallway like sunlight breaking through fog. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. That sound had been gone for so long. It almost felt unreal. He followed it. Each step quickened his pulse until he reached the twins' room. What he saw stopped him cold. Grace was sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by chaos. Bright scarves fluttered through the air, picture books lay open, and a small keyboard glowed with colored lights. The boys were laughing, truly laughing, their eyes alive. Liam clutched a blue silk scarf, tossing it up like a kite, watching it drift before catching it again with pure delight. Noah sat near the keyboard, his small fingers pressing one tentative key after another. Each note was clumsy but full of wonder. Grace watched them, smiling softly, clapping to the rhythm as if each sound were a triumph. "Every note is part of your story," she said gently. "You're writing it one sound at a time." Ethan stood frozen, unable to process what he was seeing. This wasn't therapy. It wasn't the rigid schedule he had approved. There were no machines, no timers, no medical charts, just laughter. And for some reason, that terrified him. He stepped forward, his voice sharp. "What is this? What exactly do you think you're doing?" Grace looked up, startled but calm. "We're playing," she said. "They're learning through play. They're feeling their own movement." "This is not part of their program," Ethan snapped. "Do you think I hired you to throw scarves and sing songs? I pay world-class neurologists to create their routines. You are not authorized to improvise." Grace didn't raise her voice, where she didn't even flinch. She simply stood, brushed a scarf from her lap, and faced him with quiet strength. With respect. "Mr. Montgomery," she said, "your sons don't need another therapist treating them like broken machines. They need someone who believes in them." Ethan's jaw tightened. Belief doesn't rewire motor neurons. Sometimes a belief is the spark that makes everything else possible. Her words hit him like a slap. He felt the heat rising in his chest, anger mixing with something far more dangerous, doubt. "You think faith can replace science?" he said bitterly. "You think singing to them is progress?" Grace took a step closer, her eyes unwavering. "I think faith gives them something no doctor ever has. A reason to try." The room went still. The twins watched, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Liam's scarf floated down between them, landing at Grace's feet. She bent, picked it up, and handed it gently back to him. "Keep flying it," she said softly. "Don't stop just because someone says you can't." Ethan stared at her, at the small woman who dared to challenge everything he had built his life around. Logic, control, certainty. He wanted to tell her to pack her things, to leave his house before she filled his boys' heads with false hope. But then he heard Noah. The boy pressed another key on the keyboard, then another. The sound was uneven but deliberate. He looked up at Ethan and smiled. A real smile. Bright and full of life. "Papa, listen," he said quietly. "I made music." Ethan's throat constricted. The words died before they reached his lips. Grace didn't look at him again. She simply sat back down, clapping softly to Noah's rhythm, guiding Liam's scarf back into the air. The colors, the laughter, the sound, all of it swirled together until the sterile room felt almost holy. And Ethan, who had once believed money could solve anything, felt something he couldn't buy tightening in his chest. Faith. He hated how fragile it felt. He hated that she was right. And yet, for the first time, he didn't walk away. It was nearly dark when Ethan came home that night. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened under the amber city lights. The mansion was quiet, almost too quiet. He loosened his tie, exhaled, and prepared himself for another night of silence. Then he heard it. Music, soft, rhythmic, and alive. A melody drifting down the hallway, rising and falling like a heartbeat. It wasn't from the speakers or the television. It was real. He followed the sound, his shoes clicking against the marble floor. As he approached the kitchen, he heard laughter, a mix of small voices and Grace's gentle encouragement. His pulse quickened. The sight that met him stole the breath from his lungs. Grace was behind Liam and Noah, her arms stretched carefully under theirs. The boys were trembling, their legs shaking violently, their tiny feet pressing against the cold marble. But they were standing, not sitting, not held in chairs. Standing. Grace's voice was calm but full of fire. Breathe, boys. Feel the floor beneath you. You're strong, stronger than you think. The twins wobbled like baby deer learning to walk. Their faces were flushed with effort, their eyes wide with disbelief and joy. Then Liam looked up and saw his father in the doorway. "Papa," he gasped, his small voice ringing like a bell. "Look, we're standing." Ethan's body went rigid. His heart slammed against his ribs. For a moment, he thought he was hallucinating. It couldn't be real. The doctors had said it was impossible. The muscles were too weak, the neural pathways too damaged. And yet there they were, his sons, upright, defiant against every prediction. He stumbled forward, gripping the counter to steady himself. His throat closed up, his vision blurred. He didn't even realize he was crying until a tear hit the marble. Grace looked at him, her face glowing with both pride and exhaustion. "They did it, Mr. Montgomery," she whispered, "all by themselves." The air felt thick, heavy, alive. Liam giggled, his small body shaking from both fear and triumph. Noah's lips trembled, his eyes filled with tears. "Papa," he whispered faintly, "I'm standing too." Ethan's knees gave out. He dropped to the floor, pressing both hands over his mouth as sobs tore through his chest. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but never truly believed it could happen. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, the faint melody still playing from the small speaker, all of it faded into nothing. The only sound that mattered was his son's breathing. Standing, living. Grace's voice broke the silence again, softer this time. "They wanted to surprise you. We've been practicing balance for weeks." Ethan looked up, eyes glistening. "But the doctors said—" "They said it was impossible." Grace finished for him. "But children don't know what impossible means. I didn't tell them they couldn't, so they tried." Ethan let out a broken laugh through his tears. He crawled forward now, wrapping his arms around both boys, afraid that if he blinked, the miracle would vanish. He felt their hearts pounding against his chest. Fast, strong, alive. Liam grinned through his tears. "Did we do good, Papa?" Ethan nodded, his voice shaking. "You did more than good. You did the impossible." Grace stepped back quietly, her eyes shining. She didn't need applause. She didn't need thanks. Watching them stand was enough. In that kitchen, surrounded by warmth and light, Ethan realized something that no amount of money had ever taught him. Miracles don't come from doctors, or science, or wealth. They come from belief, from someone willing to look at the impossible and whisper, "Try anyway." That night, Ethan Montgomery learned that faith is not born in churches or prayers. It's born in moments like this, moments when love dares to believe again. Ethan Montgomery had always trusted science more than faith. Numbers, reports, and logic had built his empire. But now, something he couldn't measure was happening in his own home. The boys were standing, walking a few shaky steps, laughing again, every night. He replayed that moment in the kitchen like a dream he was afraid to wake from, but doubt began to whisper. What if it was just luck? What if it was nothing more than muscle spasms and coincidence? He needed proof, so he made the call. "Dr. Anderson," he said, voice tight. "I want you to observe a session, quietly. No one must know." Daniel Anderson, the lead neurologist who had overseen the twins since birth, arrived the next afternoon, impeccably dressed, emotionless. His eyes behind thin glasses scanned everything like a scientist dissecting hope. Grace didn't know he was there at first. She began the session as usual, soft music, rhythmic play, gentle encouragement. The twins were relaxed at first, responding to her voice like it was gravity. Then she noticed him, the tall man in the corner with a notebook, scribbling every few seconds. The energy shifted immediately. Liam froze mid-motion. Noah's hands trembled. The music faltered. Grace tried to keep smiling, but her calm cracked. She could feel the weight of judgment pressing against her every move. Dr. Anderson wrote something down. His pen made a sharp, surgical sound on paper. "Breathe, boys," Grace said softly. "Remember what we practiced." But it was useless. The boys' movements stiffened, their focus scattered. The fragile confidence she had built began to crumble under the invisible pressure in the room. After 20 minutes, Dr. Anderson stood. "That's enough," he said curtly. He turned to Ethan in the hallway, his tone clinical and cold. "She's imaginative. I'll give her that. But this is not structured rehabilitation. It's improvisation. What you witnessed before were likely involuntary reflexes, not progress." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Reflexes?" he repeated, barely above a whisper. "Yes. Children with neuromuscular disorders often exhibit spontaneous movement when stimulated. Do not mistake anomalies for miracles. Mr. Montgomery." The words cut through him like ice. Reflexes. He wanted to believe that wasn't true, but the doubt clawed deeper. That evening, the confrontation came like a storm. Grace was cleaning up the playroom when he walked in, his footsteps echoing with anger. "You made me look like a fool," he snapped. "You and your tricks. I invited a neurologist to observe, and you fell apart the second he walked in. Do you realize what's at stake here? These are my sons, not props for your experiments." Grace froze, then turned slowly to face him. Her voice trembled, not with fear but fury. "They are not experiments. Ethan," she said, her tone sharp as glass. "They are children, and for the first time in their lives, they believe in themselves." "You're filling their heads with false hope," he shouted. "And you," she fired back, "are so terrified of false hope that you've stopped believing in anything at all." The room went silent. Her words hung in the air like a blow neither of them could dodge. Ethan's face hardened, but his eyes wavered. "You don't understand what it's like to watch them fail," he whispered. Grace stepped closer, her voice steady now. "No, I understand exactly what it's like to watch someone stop trying." He opened his mouth to argue but couldn't find the words. For the first time, her defiance didn't feel like rebellion, it felt like truth. She gathered her things quietly, leaving the room without another glance. Ethan stood there alone, surrounded by toys, music sheets, and the echo of her words. He sank onto the couch, pressing his hands to his face. For years, he had blamed doctors, fate, even God for what happened to his children. But tonight, for the first time, he wondered if the real enemy wasn't science or faith. Maybe it was him. Days passed in silence. The storm between Ethan and Grace had left the house heavy with unspoken words. She came to work as usual, but her laughter was softer, her movements quieter. Ethan watched her from afar, torn between guilt and pride. The twins still adored her. Liam's curiosity bloomed like a wildflower, and Noah quiet, Gentle Noah had begun trying things he'd never dared before. He no longer hid behind his chair. He reached for books, for toys, for balance. That afternoon, Grace spread a colorful mat on the floor. Sunlight spilled through the windows, bathing the room in gold. She turned to Noah and said softly, "Let's try something today. Just you and me?" Liam clapped excitedly. "Can I help, Miss Grace?" "You can cheer," she smiled. "That's the most important job." Ethan watched from the doorway, unseen. His heart thudded hard against his ribs. He wanted to step in, to stop it. The fear came flooding back. What if the attempt hurt him? What if the miracle shattered? Grace knelt beside Noah, her voice calm, her hands steady. "You've got this," she whispered. "Remember how strong you are." Noah looked at her, eyes wide with both fear and hope. His small hands gripped the edge of the mat. His legs trembled. His breath came in short bursts. "Breathe," Grace said softly. "Feel the ground beneath you. It's yours." For a moment, the world held its breath with him. Then, slowly, painfully, he pushed himself upward. His knees straightened, his body wobbled, his arms stretched for balance. The tremor in his legs was visible, but he didn't fall. He was standing. Grace's eyes widened, tears welling instantly. "Yes, Noah," she whispered. "You're doing it. You're standing." Ethan's hands gripped the doorway until his knuckles turned white. Every second stretched like an eternity. Noah's head turned toward him, his little face shining with pride. His voice came out as a trembling whisper, but it carried through the whole room. "Papa, I'm standing by myself." The words hit Ethan like thunder. His knees weakened, his chest burned. The sound of his son's voice, so small, so brave, cut through every wall he'd built. Grace's tears spilled freely. Liam screamed with joy, clapping wildly. "You did it! Noah, you did it!" Noah wobbled but didn't fall. He steadied himself, one shaky breath at a time. Ethan stumbled forward, dropping to his knees beside him, his vision blurred through tears. He reached out, terrified to touch him, afraid the moment might vanish if he did. Noah looked up, smiling. "Papa, I'm really standing." Ethan's voice cracked. "Yes, you are. Son, you really are." He pulled both boys into his arms, holding them so tightly that all three trembled together. Grace stood behind them, hands covering her mouth, crying silently. The room was filled with sunlight and tears and something sacred, something no doctor, no machine, no chart could explain. Ethan looked at Grace through the blur. "How?" he whispered. She wiped her cheeks and smiled through her tears. "Because he believed he could." It was so simple, so disarming, that Ethan laughed, a deep, shaking laugh that came from years of pain finally cracking open. In that golden moment, the fear that had haunted him, the fear of false hope, of failure, of heartbreak melted away. What replaced it wasn't logic or certainty. It was faith, pure, childlike faith. He hugged Noah tighter, breathing in the scent of sunlight and warmth. "You made me believe again," he whispered. Grace looked down at the floor, her voice barely audible. "It was never me, Ethan. It was them." For the first time in years, Ethan Montgomery felt weightless. The world hadn't changed. The diagnoses hadn't vanished. But everything inside him had, because his son had stood up, not just with his legs, but with his heart. And so had he. Time moved differently after that day. Not in leaps, but in tiny, trembling victories. The mansion that once echoed with silence was now filled with the sound of life music, laughter, and the rhythmic thud of small feet learning how to defy gravity. Progress came slowly, painfully, but it came. Liam learned to balance for longer stretches, his arms out like wings, wobbling but refusing to fall. Noah took his first real steps between two chairs, Each stride a battle between fear and courage. Grace turned therapy into stories, lessons into adventures. Each morning,